Shalom. Welcome to this class on Israel, God's answer to skeptics. I believe that you will find this to be the best apologetic argument, defense, in why the God of Israel and Jesus as the Messiah is the one true God and the only answer for mankind. I think it's the best apologetic because it's God's apologetic. Israel. A number of years ago, 1899, Mark Twain wrote an article titled Concerning the Jews in Harper's Magazine. He said this: "If statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous dim puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of. But he is heard of, has always been heard of. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people. And his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are also way out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. He has made a marvelous fight in this world, in all the ages, and had done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled this planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other people have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind." And then Mark Twain writes this: "All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains." What, Mark Twain asks, is the secret of his immortality? Well, this lesson, this class, will actually answer Mark Twain's question. The nation of Israel and her people, the Jewish people, are an enigma to this world. Preservation of the people of Israel is a contradiction of all historical trends. The uniqueness of this people is captured in the essay that Mark Twain authored that we just read. Now, the statement of a truth does not necessarily make it true about the one to whom it is applied. One has every right, indeed every necessity, to demand evidence proving the validity of a claim. When the issue deals with the question, which God is the true God? Which, by the way, is the most important and fundamental question facing mankind. It is imperative that the evidence be indisputable, even inexplicable, outside of the one true God's intervention. It is on the basis of this proposition that a challenge is issued by the God of Israel to all who claim to follow the one true God. This challenge is the subject of this class. Isaiah chapter 40 in verses 12 through 31. This section shifts thoughts from the first 11 verses of this chapter with a challenge to Jewish people. It builds on the command to comfort Israel that we find in verses 1 and 2 of Isaiah 40. That comfort is through their Messiah and God. In total, There are 7 thoughts in this section of chapter 40, verses 12 through 31, that we will examine. The premise, the problem, the proposition, the puzzle, the politicians, the plan, and the power. The premise: God is omnipotent. God is all-powerful. In verse 12, we are told, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and meted out heaven with a span, and comprehended the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance. Shows God's power. He has meted out heaven with the span of his hand. He has weighed the mountains in a scale. And then he goes on and says, behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. How insignificant is one drop of water in a bucket, or one speck of dust on a balance scale. Behold, he takes up the isles as a very little thing. Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. All the nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. So the premise is that God is omnipotent, all-powerful. Nothing can stand up to his power, even all the nations of the world combined. Secondly, the premise is God is omniscient, all-knowing. In verses 13 and 14, we are told this: who hath directed the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor hath taught him? With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, taught him knowledge, and showed to him the way of understanding? Does God need a counselor? Does God need someone to direct his way? Obviously not, because God knows everything. He knows the end from the beginning. He is omniscient, all-knowing. And the third premise of this portion of the Word of God: God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? A number of questions are asked, incredulously. And then the statement: it is he, that's Jehovah God, the God of Israel. It is he that sits upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreads them out as a tent to dwell in. And the picture is the entire universe is like a small tent that God dwells in. If one is in a small tent, everything is in your presence. God is omnipresent. So the premise is that the God of Israel is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. He knows everything. He is all-powerful. He is everywhere. Now, this is foundational for the argument, for the apologetic, that God himself gives on why he is the one true God. The next lesson, we will look at the 6 remaining thoughts: the problem, the proposition, the puzzle, the politicians, the plan, the power. But underlying all that we will look at in this class and the lessons we will be going through is the premise that the God of Israel is omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, and omnipresent. everywhere. Until we meet next time, shalom.